Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Minkyu and Shiyoon. We're recording this on August 17th. We don't know when this is going to come out. But how have you been, Shiyoon? How have you been since our first episode?
Good. I think I've been hearing a lot of good feedback actually from work.
Yeah, me
People at
too.
Netflix were like, "Oh, hey, like you guys have a podcast. That's really cool."
Yeah.
Actually, my cute office mate Tony was like, he really liked it. He liked the little logo that you
Oh,
did.
he did? Oh, cool.
Um,
Yay.
and so I think there's a lot of people excited for it.
Mm,
Yeah,
same. Is there anything new or noteworthy that happened to you this week? Anything new that you saw?
yeah.
Anything new in life in general?
I mean, the only I don't really watch TV shows or haven't really got into it
Mm,
as much, but
interesting. We should go into
maybe
that
not a good thing.
in another episode.
But I did see a trailer for the new Terrence Malick film. It looks pretty awesome.
It's called A Hidden Life.
The Hidden
Yeah.
Life. Pretty. I was pretty excited about it.
Yeah.
It felt almost. It's kind of saying something about what's happening in the world. Saying something about America. I think. I
Yeah.
felt like it's very directed at America, even though it's in Germany. I think.
Yeah. Totally. You know what's really interesting about Terrence Malick is that he's always been such a recluse. Like he's such
Oh.
an elusive figure. You know, you never see him doing interviews or doing any public appearances, but sometimes with every one of his movies, there seemed to be some kind of message, whether it's like really pointed or not.
Right.
And I think it's really interesting what he tends to focus on with his movies, especially considering that, you know, he went to Harvard for philosophy.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't
So,
know that. Oh,
yeah.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think uh, it seems like now, it seems like there's, like now is a good opportunity to do films that are more like socially, like they
Yeah,
want to change society. They have something to say like about what's going on now. Because I feel
for
like,
sure.
especially with things are going in the world, there's just so much to make art about. So
Yeah. I think it raises interesting questions about like art and politics. You know,
right,
should they mix or which I think would be really interesting for us to discuss in a future episode as well.
yeah,
I'd be interested to hear about it. I don't know if our listeners would, but
I'm
let us
sure they
know.
would.
um, so another thing that happened actually just today is that the great master animator Richard Williams passed away. Obviously, Richard Williams is, you know, a monumental, incomparable name in the industry, in just the art form of animation. And, you know, for me, it's like whenever I see that animation survival kit and just that image of like all the different characters walking, like that's such an iconic image. And there's something about that image that always brings me back to like first year at Cal Arts when I first brought that book and I had my dinky little cube and I was just so excited to go through that book and start doing like different walk tests and stuff like that. But I don't know, do you have a favorite
Yeah,
memory?
no, I remember him like when he first released the book. He came to Cal Arts
Wow.
and he did a really great lecture on just some of the things that are actually in his book. And he's got like he actually not only is he's amazing animator, but he was also friends with all those like some of the Nine Old Men, like
Mm-hmm.
those golden age of animation people like Grim Natwick, um, Art Babbitt.
Mm-hmm.
So
And you learned from Milt Kahl.
yeah, he's kind
Yeah.
of like a geek too. He's like really
Well, I
he
think that, sorry to cut you off, but I really think that raises like important issues. Like for me, first of all, the first thing that comes to mind is like, you know, the saying like those who can't do teach.
mm,
Like I think that's such a stupid saying because he was one of the best living animators, but he also had a passion for teaching. And
right,
I just want to put this out there, but I just feel like that saying should go because I think it's disrespectful for artists and I think it's also disrespectful for teachers
right.
because it's like no, teachers teaching is actually a skill too. So it's not like when you say those who can't do teach is like putting down teaching. No, it's like that's actually doing as well. You
Yeah,
know?
I think he had a heart to really just not just like keep the knowledge and just take it to his grave, but he
Yeah.
really just had a heart to kind of share it with the people that are interested in it, and the book kind of does that, and then he came out with these like DVD
Yeah.
things where you can actually see, like, sometimes it's better to not just read the book and
Yeah, totally.
understand, like if you can actually see what he's talking about and he's animating the thing.
Yeah. No, so important for animation, especially because you're learning motion.
And I love this film, The Thief and the Cobbler.
God, so good.
Really fantastic.
Incredible. Yeah, I'll never forget like the day I first saw the original Richard Williams director's cut, work in progress of that film that in my first year our animation teacher Mike Wen showed us, and it just completely blew my mind. And I actually think it's up on YouTube for people to see. So I think people should definitely try to watch the original Richard Williams intended directorial cut of The Thief and the Cobbler. It's an incredible feat of animation. And again, going back to taste, like the compositional choices, the character animation, and just pushing character animation into another level, how they move and how each of the characters are just so specific. Like the movement is so specific to the characters. I mean, it's really another level.
And he took quite a long time making it, right? And
yeah,
it wasn't just like a 2-3 year thing. It seemed like it was like,
yeah,
I don't know, like a long period of time to really hone in on that.
Totally. And I think there were a lot of atrocious injustices done to that film, especially with the release of it. But at least, thankfully, hopefully we'll be able to remember that film for his, original intended direction. And just one of the things that you mentioned earlier, too, that really sticks with me is like the fact that he learned from, some of the Nine Old Men and these great animators. Like it kind of raises a lot of interesting subjects to me about just how much of a mentor art form animation is as well, and that there's kind of a beauty of it being passed down from Milt Kahl to Richard Williams, and then Richard Williams to really every animator in the world. I think he made that precious knowledge so accessible to everyone.
Right.
But at the same time, it's kind of like interesting and bittersweet to think about like that kind of lineage of learning animation from like the Nine Old Men and then the generation after the Nine Old Men. That's almost like a tide, receding back into the ocean, and it just makes me feel how precious that is. Like the value of learning from a mentor who learned from another mentor and so forth. Yeah.
Hey, so we're going to take a break. We're going to introduce our amazing, talented friend, artist, art director, production designer, Helen Chen. She's amazing. She's a rock star. So stay tuned. Hey guys, we're back, and I just wanted to introduce our guest, Helen Chen, an amazing art director, illustrator, viz dev artist. She's worked on Frankenweenie, Paperman, Wreck-It Ralph, Big Hero 6. She was also associate production designer on Wreck-It Ralph 2. She also does several different comic book titles, including DC's Gotham's Academy, Batgirl, and Marvel's Sinister Silk. Thanks for coming on our show.
Thank you
Helen.
so much for being on the show, Helen.
Thanks for having me.
So, Helen, before we get into our talk, we're actually experimenting with a new segment in our podcast where we answer some of our listener questions first. And is that cool with you?
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Okay, cool. So the first question comes from Benjamin Shipper. His Instagram handle is at Benjamin Shipper. That's SCHIPPER. So Benjamin says, "Hi, Minkyu and Shiyoon. Thank you for sharing your experiences and animation knowledge with the world through your new podcast. In my limited reason and opinion, the animation industry and studios seem today to be the only formal career with a clear hierarchical system for creative work. I'm a cartoonist and know many others in the same field and others, illustration, writing, etc., who work predominantly alone, not in a vacuum, but removed from the studio/office system. We have clients and peers instead of bosses. We work from our homes in our pajamas, sleep when we want, wake up when we want, etc. While on the surface this is easily seen as enviable freedom, and of course it is to a degree, I'm feeling the fatigue of prolonged work without critique, encouragement, specific deadline pressures, an artistic standard to live up to, a boss to impress, and peers to compete with. Do you find these things in the animation industry, or am I glamorizing studio life? How has working within an established tradition, the animation studio framework, helped you grow in life and work? I know that's a long/wordy question. Would love to hear an answer on your podcast, but I know you've probably received a ton and might not be able to get to this one. Thanks for your time, and I look forward to many more episodes. So I actually have a lot of opinions on this, and it's bringing up a lot of thoughts, but I do want to hear your guys' thoughts first. What do you guys think about this?
I just read this question like 5 minutes ago, and I've been thinking about it since. And for me, I know it's like very personal though, because I know as a person, I know me, and I know that without structure, I will not survive. Like I know I'm the type of person that will not be able to set a time like, oh, I gotta wake up now. I don't have a very structured life, so I kind of need the studio system, or even the it goes into the art school or versus like self-education route too. Like I feel like I would not have been able to learn and to grow in the way I need to be able to be where I am today without a more structured system like a traditional art school. So it's like very personal for me. Like I don't know how it is for others, and I see like freelancers all the time who are just on it, and I don't know that would be me. Like I need to go into my office, sit at my desk where only work happens, and then like do work.
So do you find that like when you're freelancing a little bit and when you're in between like jobs or something, do you find that your productivity level goes down, or?
It's either that or I just get very unbalanced and stressed out. Like for example, like I think I did the Gotham Academy stuff like years ago, like 4 years ago, but I did it on top of working at Disney. And it was, and I tried to structure it. I set out timetables for, how much time I would get at night to do it, and on Saturdays, and I had it all structured, and it just fell apart. It was me the last week staying up until 4 a.m. The last like 5 days until I finished it, because it was a full issue. I drew it and then I painted it as well, and it's like 22 pages, and I had about a month turnaround time to do it from when I received the script. So it was a mad scramble, and I kind of like find myself in that position all the time because I have this thing where I want to do a little bit of everything. I'm kind of greedy that way. I want to try new things, and so I take on a lot, and then I have a hard time scheduling it, and then I regret it and I get stressed out. But then by the next time something fun comes along, I'm like, I can do that too, and it's like this vicious cycle. So I can only imagine how chaotic my life would be without having a 9 to 5 basically to kind of keep me in a structured zone where I can actually do work and do it on time.
Does it help to like separate that out? Like imagine freelancing, you have to make up your own schedule, but like 9 to 5 is like, okay, this is when I'm gonna be doing this thing. And then outside of that, I just don't think about that stuff. Like it's like for me it's like healthy. Like I need that. Like I'm like I just need to not think about whatever that's happening at work and leave that at work, and then just really, does that help with you? Like when like, okay, you have your home life and then you have your work life. Do you like to separate those out, or do they just kind of, it's just like mesh into each other?
I do like to separate it. And I think that's why when I'm actually at home, it like say I have a work from home day, which we do once in a while, but not too often. I get up and then it takes me forever to just sit down and do something. I'm like, I guess I'll do stuff I've never wanted to do before. I'm like, I guess I'll take out the trash, or maybe I'll clean the stove real quick. Like I just get these impulses to do anything but the work. Right. And when I'm at home, it just for some reason that's just what happens, and so I know I just can't do those because then nothing will happen.
No, and I think that's a really important aspect of an artist's life, is that there should be some kind of separation between where you sleep and where you work. Even if it's a different room, like sometimes that separation is really healthy. Another thing that this question does ask us, though, I think, which is like a really interesting angle, is like the whole social angle. Like, do you find room for critique, encouragement, specific deadline pressures, an artistic standard to live up to, a boss to impress, and peers to compete with. What do you think about that? Because to me, when I read this question, I kind of got the impression that like, oh, this person also wants that kind of social interaction. Because like when you're just a freelancer, sometimes you could just be so isolated in your little workspace, and there is something about like the energy that like being with a lot of people brings that's also kind of like fueling for your artistic life.
Definitely, yeah. I definitely need that.
Yeah.
And I think the most growth I've ever had in my artistic life has been because I've been around other people who in turn pushed me. Right now I'm in this office with like 4 other people. It's the first time I've shared an office with that many, and they're all from different disciplines like 3D, layout, like texture, and it's amazing just to also learn more about what they do. And so, I mean, at Disney, like when I first started, the best thing possible was for me to just access the server and be able to see what every individual artist was up to and how they were pushing the bar in different ways. Seeing Minkyu's work on Frozen, I think that's when I saw your Snow Queen stuff first, is when I was a trainee. And just, I think that part of it really does push you. And I think you both know this about me. We've talked about it a couple of times. I have a twin sister. And so naturally growing up, we were just competitive. So I'm a competitive person. And I'm not gonna say it's the healthiest thing, but it does push me more than I know my base person inside of here would, you know?
Wow, for sure. Yeah, it's tricky for me because it's like when I read this and he talks about like his freelance life of waking up whenever you want, like that is the ideal life that I want. Like that sounds wonderful. But at the same time, I could totally relate to like sometimes when you're just alone too much and then all your friends are at work, like having lunch together, you do want like, for me, I guess it's like a balance. And like going back to what you said, Helen, like it is kind of a personal preference, but like I feel like maybe this is going off of a tangent a little bit, but I feel like one of the things that this brought up to me is like there needs to be a more, going off of Helen's point, there needs to be a little bit more of like a personally customized workplace, I think, for people. Because like one of the triggering thoughts that I have about this is like I think also of like the more Silicon Valley type workplace, right? Where it's like just open and it's all about collaboration and yeah, bring your laptop to this counter and like you may meet someone new. And it's like that type of work environment also I could see myself being so stressed out with and like not being productive at all. And I think that's one of the things that I wish, at least my hope is that like animation workplaces of the future really start addressing is that every artist is so individual. Some artists are going to be more productive in that environment because they are more extroverted as opposed to, you know, artists like me who are more introverted and need my space. And I've also had an experience with another project where it was the opposite of this case, where it was more of like, no, you have to come to work so we can force camaraderie. Messages for the producers out there. But like, I think like, hey, as long as, you know, the artists are meeting the deadlines, like why not let them work from home for some days and come to the office when they want to? Because it's like when you're always with the group, when it's like just one or the other too extreme, I feel like that's when the imbalance starts happening. And I feel like some days artists do need to wake up in their own time and work in their pajamas. And then some days they're going to miss being with friends so they can have that freedom too, you know?
I think also it's like, well, it's not just about hitting the deadline too. It's like, well, you could hit the deadline, but it could just be like kind
crappy
of
work.
Just crappy work or a generic idea. And you kind of want to make everybody like working in my ideal situation, like as come up with great ideas and something fresh and creative. And I think like I have a daughter, and like I could tell she just is naturally creative when she's having fun, and there's something to lean into that. And whatever that I'm basically saying just make the workplace fun to be.
I know. I remember sometimes that like at work you would be like, what if we just like went outside and just drew in the park for 4 hours.
Oh,
Like you would just
sounds
say it,
awesome.
like
I'm
Yeah.
a crazy person.
No, but like
it's
those things
yeah.
are so helpful,
Yeah.
right? Like sometimes they can be.
I think I wanted a meeting in a car. Like, why
car?
don't we do like the art meeting and we drive to Santa Barbara and then we just
Santa Barbara is so far
because then we
away.
can, it's just, it's
all the
like it's
wineries?
basically 2 hours. It's like a 2 hour, 3 hour drive. You can have
my
you
God.
talk about as much as you want to, and you're inside a car. And then at the end of it, you could get some ice cream, eat something nice,
Drink
in
some
Santa,
wine.
drink some wine, and then drive back. And then I think just in the fact of driving there and then driving back,
You'd
I
solve the
think
movie, solve the whole thing.
solve
Yeah. Well, I
everything.
will say this. I will say this. There is something about like that you're actively going from destination A to destination B while
Right.
talking. I do think there is something that is mobilizing to that. And I definitely have in the past with my artist friends, whenever we're in like long rides together, have like had really meaty, healthy conversations about art. I don't know about you guys, but I think there is something to that. Let's
Should
do
do
it,
it.
guys.
We should do it. Just a day trip to Santa Barbara for ice cream.
Yeah.
Ice cream. Yeah.
So, okay, we're going to go to the next question, if that's okay. This question is from Ju Young. She says, "Hi, Minkyu and Shiyoon. Your guys' first podcast episode was brilliant. I had so much fun listening, laughing, and also found myself answering questions that you asked each other. My earliest memory of drawing was when I was about 3 to 4 years old. I was watching my mom draw a strawberry with perfect strokes and with such ease. And for a long time, I kept my mom's drawing and I would look at it and try to copy it, but it was never as perfect as my mom's. Ah ha ha. Time skipped to while I was soul searching in college. I took a 2D, 3D animation class and I learned a lot, and I still have a great respect for those who do animation. So it was a very nice walk down memory lane listening to your commentaries on first assignments like the bouncing ball. And Shiyoon's question of what is authentic was awesome, and Minkyu's response reminded me of a line I heard recently: stay you, stay true. It's easy to fall into a hive mind and copy what everyone else is doing or drawing in a style that is aesthetically pleasing to a large majority of people. Nothing wrong with trying out different styles and doing it for fun, but if you're in it for the long run, I think it's important to stick with what represents you. There's a billion people on this earth, but only one you, so create something that's unapologetically uniquely you. I have 2 questions for the both of you. 1, what do you want to accomplish with animation? Is it to make people feel something, to shed light on controversial issues? 2, I think good script and good animation paired together makes an undeniable duo. Do you have a favorite animated scene with great dialogue that still wows you to this day? Thank you, Minkyu and Shiyoon, for creating an engaging and insightful podcast. Looking forward to all the future episodes. So yeah, she asked 2 questions. The first one is, what do you want to accomplish with animation? What do you guys think? What do you want to accomplish with animation, Helen?
It's so weird because as a Viz Dev artist, I find myself in a position where I feel like a lot of times Viz Dev is like the supporting cast to somebody else's vision. Mm-hmm. A lot of animation jobs are. That's just the way it is. And it wasn't until recently that I started thinking about what it would mean if I were to create something. You know, that's another question that I don't feel like, at least for me, I really thought about until very recently, which is kind of weird, but that's just me.
That's exciting though.
It is exciting,
Yeah.
and it's like, and it's one of those things where I know we're probably gonna talk a little bit about this stuff later, but I recently saw The Farewell.
Oh yeah.
And it was such a crazy experience to sit in this theater. It was full of people. It was one of those where the director came in after and answered some questions at the theater in Hollywood, but I remember sitting in that theater. Of course, I went with my sister, and we're both like bawling. Because it was just, there were parts of it that just felt so true to me specifically as a Chinese American person. Yeah. We also took my mom, and she did not experience it the same way, which was interesting. Wow. And it's probably because she's a little bit more removed from that experience as just kind of a first generation immigrant, older person, didn't really relate to like the main character. But I kind of feel like I want to see more of stories like that, or things that are being told from somebody's very specific point of view that you wouldn't be able to get, that isn't kind of mass produced, or even out there to, like, it's not even really trying to, I don't think that that the director actually went out of her way to try and make something groundbreaking, but it was groundbreaking to me. You know, it's not groundbreaking in terms of like Thor smashing a hammer onto like
Literally
you know,
groundbreaking.
Like Thanos' head.
Yeah.
But to me, it was groundbreaking. It felt so real, and parts of it actually mirrored me and my sister's life in a very strange way that I won't get into here. But it felt real, and it was like one of the first times I was in a theater, and I was thinking like, oh, it's, I guess it's a story worth telling, and it's like you grow up with these stories and you end up thinking your own story as a person maybe isn't interesting enough, and but now I'm like, oh, maybe it is, and maybe it's just up to certain people to say something.
For sure.
Because I think that's what's kept me from thinking about this stuff before, is like, oh, what do I have to say? Like, what do I have to give to the world, really?
Yeah.
And so I'd always been content just being kind of a visive artist, kind of like just, you know, helping out wherever I could. And now it's like, oh, maybe it doesn't have to be just that, you know?
Yeah.
Is there any like specific like let's say issues or subject matter or things that just you growing up as a Chinese American female artist or just who you are as a person, like is there anything that you'd be like, oh, like I could see myself, I wish there were more films like that, or I would want to make a film like that?
You know, it's really funny because it's like I don't consider myself some deeply philosophical soul or anything. And most of the time I'm just thinking about stuff that interests me in some way. And one of my recent ideas, I don't know if I'm going to like, please don't steal my idea, but this is what I'm going to do.
No one steal.
No one's gonna steal
This is like,
Trust us.
yes.
All
Right,
of
guys?
Minkyu's listeners, please don't. No.
This is a
Minkyu's
metaphysical
listeners, not
copyright
mine.
moment, guys. Like, it's in recording.
but also it's not really that great of an idea. But I thought it would be so funny to do like a reality TV show about what it's like to work at an animation studio and all the
Oh my
bizarre
God.
shit that happens.
Oh yeah.
You cut it away, you get your like, oh my God, it's Andy's idea too.
Our producer
Let's make
Andy
it.
is like saying, that was my idea. Oh,
But it's like, have you ever seen that 30 Rock episode where it's like they do this spoof off of like almost like the Real Housewives or something, but it's called
Right.
Queen of Jordan.
Yeah.
It's
yeah.
hilarious.
Yeah, I know what
But
you're
it's
talking
like,
about, yeah.
can you imagine like you're just interviewing these artists and it cuts to the executives and then it's like the office shot where they're interviewing. You know, it's like
Yeah.
The Office, but within animation studio.
Yeah, no, okay, so...
I thought of something very similar.
Okay, so
and-
maybe it's
and
not a
feel free-
groundbreaking idea. Okay,
No.
got it.
I
No,
think it's
I
a
mean,
great
it
idea.
is a
That's why I
groundbreaking
thought of it too.
idea. If there are any like rich people out there who want to fund this, we're here.
But this is actually a Disney idea. It's not my. It's like something I can't do because I don't work there anymore. But like, I think they should totally do John Musker, Brad Bird, Tim Burton, like Office, like when they were working in animation, because I feel like they had a lot of great stories
Yeah,
then.
I mean, you hear stories too about them. They were like they went to school together. They
Yeah.
some of them were even roommates. Like how wacky is that? It's like Seinfeld, but
Yeah.
like
That's
With-
my
you
like
know?
favorite part of working with John or Ron or Glenn or anyone from that generation is just like tell us all the stories, like literally in meeting rooms, like let's just stop talking about this story, tell us like your actual story, because that's always like the most fun,
Right.
juiciest,
Yeah.
exhilarating, like it just makes you go like, whoa, he did what, you know?
Right.
It's so fun.
but it's also great because I think that those shows also are kind of like they use it as a good format to go into other things. Like you asked me about what it was like to be a Chinese American woman working in animation, and I'm not gonna. I don't know that my experience has been, you know, like more extraordinarily good or bad comparatively to other people. I just don't know. But there are moments when it makes me think a little bit. Oh, is that something that you would have said to another artist, like or something
Yeah.
like that? You know.
Sure.
And I think. Like, that's why I thought about doing a show like that, because you can showcase different people from different backgrounds all working together toward this common goal and be able to hit some. I do think it's important to hit kind of like not in a way where you're just trying to like vibe off of something popular, but I do think it's important to shed light on recent issues politically or socially. I do think that an artist voice matters for that. That's what they've done for centuries, and it shouldn't stop now.
Yeah.
And so it's like you could mix the funny stuff with stuff that does ring true to specific people.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Now, okay, so that leads me to another related question that we had for you. Do you have kind of things you wish executives would think or ask about when reviewing designs or your artwork? or even like first time directors?
It's kind of interesting because I feel like I haven't really even gotten into like to be able to witness like the mind of an executive, quote unquote. I'm using like air quotes, because as a viz dev artist or somebody just starting up, it's not something that you're always privy to or have a good understanding of.
Right.
But I do think that for me, the most important thing that I like to get out of, especially directors for direction, is like how they feel about something. A lot of times you get, you know, what they want, and sometimes they don't give the clearest direction, but it's hard to nail down. I feel like as a viz dev artist or art director or story artist or whoever, you have to act like kind of a mind reader.
You have to read between the lines. You have to see the note behind the note.
Exactly, and that's a skill in of itself.
Totally,
and
a skill that they don't teach in art school.
No,
really.
they do not.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of stuff that could be lost in translation. But if I know how somebody feels about it, like then for me that's always kind of the linchpin, the pivot that I go off of that is really helpful for me personally.
Yeah.
And I do wish that sometimes when people are looking at things, they like, I like hearing other viewpoints that and even the ones that are way out there or not what I was thinking, because then it could open up another door. But the frustrating notes are the kind ones that come from like you can just tell it's a personal preference. You can just tell they just have a different taste and it's not related to the story or any reasoning.
Right.
They just hate the color purple
or whatever, something like that. Like things like that seem arbitrary are frustrating for me because it's not something that I can guess, and it's not something that necessarily is that I know or feel like is important to the story. And
Do you
we're
feel
all
like
kind
they
of
should be more upfront about it? Like, hey guys, I just like this. Like, I want this.
I mean,
because
I would
think it's
respect that
cool.
too. I mean, you know,
Or-
at the end of the day, we're all here to do a job, and I would
Right.
be fine with that as well. But I give this advice to my students sometimes when I do teach or workshops or whatever. But when I was starting up as a viz dev artist, or even now, if I have a very strong feeling about something and I get a note that's kind of opposite of that, I'll just end up doing two versions. What I feel like is the right solution and what they asked for.
Smart.
Right.
And then I present both and be like, here, I did what you asked for, but I
Right.
feel strongly that this other solution would also work, and this is why. And I kind of let them choose. And the success rate is actually pretty good. It's like 50-50. And it's like, and I think people are open to it as long as, I think knowing why is just important for everybody. If they know why I chose it and they can see my thinking and agree with it, then that's the best case scenario. And same when they give me a note, if I can see there's a reason for it and why they want it, then I can connect better with that note.
Yeah.
Because I feel sometimes executives or just people in that position, just in general, I almost feel like, yeah, positive notes, of course they're going to say it, but like really, if you go into like this past the super, you go to the id, like the basic id of it,
Yeah.
the real truth of it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's kind of scary.
yeah.
Maybe there's no right way for them to say it, and so
Yeah.
they're using these. I'm projecting here, guys.
Yeah,
so.
that's fine.
I
Let's
knew
all
that,
project.
I knew that Shiyoon's id was going to make an appearance. I'm very excited.
I was like, I wonder if it's coming from this feeling of like not feeling safe to say something completely negative in a very honest way. I wonder if they're, I don't know. Some people are better adept at saying like something that is negative, but how do you say that in a constructive way? How do
Yeah,
you
that's
say it
all
so that-
communication skill, right?
Right.
Like people don't think about like as an artist how, especially when you're working in a team like this in animation, how important communication skill or social skill is, and is almost part of your
Right.
artist skill.
Yeah, they call it like the soft skills, right?
Oh,
You
interesting.
know?
Yeah.
It's
Okay,
like
yeah.
something like that, like your
Yeah.
communication, your how you present yourself.
Along that line, we also have another question for you, Helen.
Okay.
So this is a Shiyoon question, and I thought it was really interesting because it's something that I never really thought about before, but once I heard Shiyoon talk about it a little bit, I was like, oh yeah, that would be a really cool question. Is like, is there a difference between visual development artists and production designers in terms of like how they think? I guess, is that what you were?
Yeah. So I mean, like, because I'm just even like a lot of people think, it's all about just the skill set of drawing or an art, and then like what's happening behind the scenes, there's a lot more other skill sets outside of that. I was wondering if like you could illuminate or just talk about some of those things like that you didn't really know when you were like going to school, art school, and you're just like kind of trying to just get better as an artist, and then art directing and production design, how that's like almost like a completely different,
it's totally
like,
different,
totally different thing.
And it's like, I think the biggest difference is that like when you I think I don't know, actually, you know what, I don't know if this is true. I don't know if young artists think this or if, but I know that I probably did at some point. Maybe everybody now is like smarter, but like I always thought that you just get to a certain level and you get a certain amount of experience and then you become art director. Like it was kind of like a path, right? Like you climb 10 steps, you're 10 steps higher, that's where you are. But it's actually kind of not so much to do with even the artistic skill anymore. Like to me, one of the things that I learned about being an art director or even like watching successful production designers is it's more about communication and it's more about your team at that point. It's like a good production designer, art director always protects their team. They always give them the chance to grow and to shine, and it's not about like it's no longer about you really, and it's like
you kind of have to be egoless a little bit.
You do. And it's like, and one of the biggest jobs that you have isn't to do good art. It's to distill the information from the director and give it to your artists in a way where they can be successful. So it's about giving them the tools to do well and to grow and to thrive on the show. And I remember kind of like working as a vis dev artist and you get these little sets, right? You get these little assignments. They move from week to week, task to task, and it's like you don't really get a sense of the whole. And I think that's the other part of the job is it's your job as production designer to contextualize everything for your team.
Yep.
And so what you do is you think about the whole movie. If you're especially when you see somebody like, I know it's kind of like the fancy job or whatever, but when you do color scripts or something, it's one of the rare kind of parts of making a movie and being in the vis dev department that you get to see the whole movie and its progression. You get to see that whole breakdown of and it's like it's not about like one scene, it's about how that one scene hooks up with the whole movie.
Yeah, it's about the emotional movement.
Exactly.
Of the entire
So
movie,
it's like it's also trying to give your team the information that, okay, so like for example, you have to design 2 chairs. One chair is going to have to be more important than the other chair because it can't be both important, right? And I had this as a student. I always thought I don't have any fun ideas. I don't know how I'm going to do concept art. But then it's like, it's not about having the most interesting chair. It's about having the right chair for the right moment.
Yeah.
So one of my favorite examples is that scene in The Incredibles where Bob is getting chewed out by his boss. It's like the simplest room ever, but that's the point. It's like a boring, simple room. Everything is designed very specifically, and it's beautiful. It works really well. And so you have to give that context to your team. And like artists, they just want to do their best. They want to come up with the coolest shit ever. But sometimes it's about leaving the cool stuff for this moment and then the other stuff here. So it's giving that context to your team, keeping it all in line with the overall vision of the film, distilling information you get from the directors, from the producers to your artists. And sometimes it's about letting go a little bit. Like I don't get to design every set that I want. And that's totally fine. And if I have a specific idea for a set, instead of me just doing it, I would rather ask the artist to take a stab at it. Be like, oh, I had this idea for this set. Try it out, try this, and try something else, and we'll just take a look at everything and give it to them. And if it's successful, they should get the credit for it. They did the work, and it's not even... So it's like it's taking yourself out of it a little bit. So I think that for me right now in this moment, that's what I feel like is the most important part about being an art director.
That's awesome. It's like seeing the forest instead of the trees.
Yeah, and making
Right.
sure that like you don't have to be the one to plant every tree.
Yeah,
You know, like
that's
everybody
awesome.
needs a piece of the film. They're working on it together,
Yeah.
and they deserve to have their share, you know?
I feel like a clear theme
Yes.
of like interpersonal skills and communication skills is emerging from this episode, and how important it is as an
I
artist.
care about it.
Me too.
Yeah.
I do too. It really makes a huge difference in especially the life of the artist as your teammate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I think people sometimes can overlook how important like the harmony between a team or
Mm-hmm.
like how excited your artists are to get to work, go to work every
Yeah.
day.
Right.
It's like pretty important. Yeah.
I was actually thinking about this question as you were talking through that because all these memories just started floating, rushing by
Opened a
me.
Pandora's box.
Hit me with it.
I love
I
it.
was
Yeah.
like, oh wow.
Let's get
No,
into it, and if it's
totally
inappropriate,
that.
we'll edit it out.
Because some of that is like, okay, you're because you're the art director, you're looking out for your team, right? And basically, have you ever been in this situation where you're in a review, everybody likes it, director bought off on it, the crew bought off on it, like it's all like neatly bowed in, but you have your own opinion about it. Like, is it hard for you? Like, I mean, there's a point where it's like, okay, like you want to be egoless. It's all about the director's vision. It's about the crew making their work, showcase them.
But you also want to be true to your standards, and you want to call out the thing that maybe nobody else
Yes.
is seeing that you feel like
How
is
do you
going
feel
to
about
really
that?
immensely help the film.
What's your take on that?
My take is I do my due diligence. If I feel strongly about something, I will take a pass on it and I present it.
Good.
Right.
And I say, I just had thoughts about this way. What do you think? I do
Right.
that part, and then it's up to them to make a decision.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, they're the directors or whatever. They're going to make their call.
Right.
But I did my part in
Right.
saying what I think.
Flagging this
like,
issue.
And also showing them a solution that I believe in.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and then it's up to them. And then
Yeah.
for me,
Because that
it's
takes
like,
a lot of courage.
It
Yeah.
does.
I
And-
think.
And I think you do have to practice a little bit of due diligence and discerning, like what Helen said, like, is this an issue that is important enough for me
Right.
to like speak out about? Or is this something that's just like, oh, her skirt's going to be a different color?
Right.
You know, again,
Right.
like,
Yeah, I have a lot of moments like that where it's like I also have to try and look inward and be like, okay, do I not like it because it's just a personal preference, or would this also work and I just don't like it? Like,
Yeah.
it is a little bit, you have to kind of pick and choose and be introspective as well as to like why you're feeling that way. And then
Yeah.
if I do feel strongly about, like, for example, I work mostly with sets.
Right.
To me, it's more straightforward. I very much like it. And it's much easier to be like, well, for the story you said this, and this part really hit me, and I feel like the direction we're going now goes against it. What if we went more toward this direction with this? And if I do flag it, I do try to come with an example of what I mean so they can see it, and like come with a solution, you know?
Right. No,
'Cause-
because I know you're into puzzles.
I
And
do like puzzles. I'm not good at them, but I like Sudoku, and
But
I
it's,
like.
it's almost
you
like
know?
a puzzle thing, right?
Yeah.
In a way, like that situation is like you're figuring out a puzzle to solve this in the best possible way.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
you're in a way kind of taking your ego out of it, not saying like, oh, this is just purely about like what I want, but you're
Yeah.
kind of problem solving in
It's
a way
a
that's
balance, because Minkyu is right. You can't remove yourself entirely from the situation. They
Right.
wouldn't have chosen you as art director unless they believed in something you had to say,
right.
right? So you have to represent that truthfully,
Uh-huh.
but you have to, like it's day by day. I'm flying by the seat of my pants. I don't know what I'm doing.
No,
I'm just
no,
trying not
that's-
to piss anybody off. It's like
Same.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think that's what's awesome about you is that like you have the courage to do that. Like that reminded me of a quote. Someone, I think it was Maya Angelou, said something like, "Well, kindness, all those qualities of kindness and being nice to people, being patient, all that like is nothing without courage. Like if you don't have that quality of courage, like none of that, you can't really grow any of those other qualities.
That's
and
awesome.
I think that's awesome that you do that too, because I think,
try to. I don't know that I'm really good at it. I still get nervous in like pitch rooms and stuff. If I have to pitch something to the directors, I'm just like nervous inside. I can't get rid of it.
No, but I think you
Wow.
say it in a way that is constructive, though, that is for the betterment of your team. So that's
sure.
awesome.
Okay, speaking of things that you're into, I think this segment is it cool if we go into the fire round.
Okay,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
sure.
Okay, so
okay.
we have a little bit of a fire round,
Oh, okay.
and we try to tailor these to what you're into or what we guess you're into as much as possible. So, first question is DC or Marvel? Really
Oh.
quick.
DC.
DC. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter?
Oh, Harry Potter.
Narnia or His Dark Materials?
His Dark Materials.
Sailor Chibi Moon or Sailor Saturn?
Saturn.
Oh, okay. Wait, can we hold pause on that?
I know you have opinions about Sailor Moon, Minkyu.
Yeah, no, we got it because it's like I know we're both big fans of Sailor Moon, and
Oh,
you
okay,
know.
can I just interject a really funny story?
Yes, please.
Okay, speaking of Sailor Moon, so Minkyu's art is actually my wallpaper on my
Oh,
phone.
yeah,
Oh
I
my
did
God.
And
notice
it
that.
has been that for
no
a couple
way.
of years now. But I was in the story room recently,
I'm
just
so
last
flattered.
week, and Paul Briggs saw my phone, and he was just like, Helen, do you have your own art on your wallpaper, like all judgy? And I was like, psych, bitch, it's Minkyu. But
Come
then,
on, Paul.
but then he hit me back. Deservedly so. He's like, well, then maybe you should stop drawing like Minkyu. And I was like,
What?
maybe I should.
No,
It was all in good fun.
Yeah.
I didn't take offense to it at all, but
Okay,
I was
yeah.
just like,
Well, I am so flattered.
Sailor
Thank you
Moon.
so much. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, yeah, I know. For me, it's one of the most formative pieces of animation.
Oh, yeah,
as
totally.
An
Me
artist. And
too.
you too, right?
Yeah.
What do you like about it? What is that
man.
thing that makes you keep
Okay.
going back and wanting to draw?
You know what? I could. Well, first of all, it's Sailor Moon, the TV show, is the one who actually taught me how to draw. If you see how I draw hands now, it's because of that show.
Wow.
I didn't
It
know
really
that.
did.
Oh,
I drew it over and over again. It basically got me into art. Period.
Oh, wow.
So there was that part of it, but then I could write a whole essay about this. Okay. But
Oh my gosh, let's get
Just
into
say
it.
it.
Are
No,
we
get
cool?
into it.
Yeah,
Let's do
let's
this.
get into
Let's
it.
go
Yeah.
deep.
but I just feel like there's so much stuff that we can still celebrate about Sailor Moon that's so positive for people.
Like,
Yeah,
what is that?
still to this
What
day.
To
is
this
that?
day, which is rare because a lot of times you watch something you were into when you were younger and you were like, oh my God, that was not okay.
They did not survive the
no,
test of time.
it did not. And Sailor Moon is still holding strong.
It's still like so woke.
It is.
And like truly for like a feminist piece of animation,
Yeah.
like and still not bending to the patriarchal rules of story and,
Exactly.
and values. I mean, it's still so good.
It's wonderful. Like, and one of my things recently that I was thinking about and discussing with my sister, who's very full of justice and so good for this world.
Shout out to Linda.
And I love her. And we talk about this stuff all the time because we relate and we can be
Awesome.
very, very honest with each other. But I'm kind of over this idea that the only valid heroine is one that exhibits all of these masculine qualities.
Totally.
They fight.
Amen.
They have to be strong. There's no crying, none of that stuff. But Sailor Moon is awesome. At her heart, she's a pacifist. She sucks at fighting.
Yeah.
She doesn't really do anything good. Like, she's not really good at anything, but she just believes in people and herself. And
Yeah.
there's so much love there. And then each of the Sailor Scouts have their own personalities. They're distinct from each other, and they still support each other. And it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, oh, you just can't understate that. It's,
yeah. She's
and it's
just so relentless in her compassion.
exactly.
And that is her biggest
yeah.
weapon, is
Yeah.
that she will never not be that.
Exactly. And she's consistent and
Not like Wolverine, right? Like, not.
No, but that would be a really funny team up. That would be such a funny. Someone draw that, please.
but it's like, it's still like, and it does, they deal with some stuff that's kind of freaking dark. There's all these things that they bring up, like, and that they touch on. It's, I don't know.
Did you read the manga and the
yes.
anime and all the different versions of the anime too?
I think I fell off around the Dark Moon Circus, but it's because it was hard to find.
Oh,
when
okay.
I was, I mean, guys, I'm like 32. That was a long time ago. We did not have that much access to stuff, but I mean, it's something that I go back to over and over again, and there's plenty of shows that I loved before, like Firefly or whatever, that just don't hold up anymore, and I just can't watch it.
Because I could see that movie being a CG. Like I could see someone bringing.
If
it back
somebody
to a
was like,
feature.
Helen, do a CG version of Sailor Moon, I would be like, you don't have to pay me. I will give you money.
Oh, damn. Yeah.
Please.
Seriously. Okay, wait.
Please.
Okay, one thing that I want to mention is like, okay, and this is tying back Young's question in the beginning, because I just noticed that we didn't answer one of her questions, which was like, what's your favorite animated scene with great dialogue that wows you till this day? I think I was thinking maybe we can incorporate that question into specifically Sailor Moon.
Oh, specifically.
If you
oh my God,
have,
okay.
and I
We're
can go
testing
because
our
I'm
Sailor Moon.
Oh my
no,
God,
we're not
I'm not
testing
ready
you.
for
It's just
this.
like, and it could just
Let's
be
do it.
like your favorite moment from Sailor Moon, and I can go first while you think about it.
Okay, Shiyoon Minkyu, because I remember so strongly how Sailor Moon made me feel.
Yeah.
But I gotta think about what it actually did.
For
Like, what
me,
it is.
like I really feel that like in terms of the finales, the first season of Sailor Moon has the strongest finale story-wise in terms of all of the seasons.
the barrel one.
Yeah, because
Wait, so
basically,
yeah.
basically what happens, and like I remember so many little moments of it, but basically all 5 of them have to teleport to Beryl's fortress, and before they teleport, they share this like little. If I'm remembering correctly, this was the Beryl arc, where they're holding hands, and before they teleport, like they ask each other, okay, once this is all done, once we defeat Queen Beryl and we're back to our normal girl lives, like what would you want to do? And they go around and they say just like the most like high school or like middle school girl stuff of like, I want to have a boyfriend and I want to just have delicious dessert. And it's like, those are the moments that make me love Sailor Moon. But then what happens is like, of course, you know, it's the finale, spoiler alert. One of them die.
Oh my God, I'm tearing up right now.
Yeah,
I'm
they
thinking
die
about it.
one after another until it's only Sailor Moon that's left. And again, spoiler alert, in the finale after Sailor Moon defeats Beryl, she resurrects everyone with her crystal, but then everyone's memory is erased. And so the last scene of the final episode of the first season is just Sailor Moon, and her memory is erased too, her going to school. And as she's going to school, she just bumps into each one of them. And like they cross paths and they're like, do I no, I don't know you. And they just like notice each other, and then it's just her going to school. And man, that when I was young, I had never seen a story moment like that, and that really got me. Where it's like, you guys just like moments before, you guys were like giving your lives to protect each other, and it's so bittersweet that now you guys get to finally live normal schoolgirl lives, but it came with the cost of like
Your memory of
you guys don't remember, but it's all fine because like later on in season 2 they reunite and their memories are resurrected in a really fun way, but nothing for me like beats that moment in terms of like emotionally impacting me. I don't know, what about
I can't choose any other one now. Minkyu just made me cry a little bit talking about it.
I know, I like, stopped myself from tearing up.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, and it's just the fact that story went there.
Yeah.
That it wasn't afraid to leave these little children with like a truly like bittersweet pang of that just like hits at your heart. I think that's what to me was the most formative thing about like that story, and still informs me to this day of like, yeah, let's not be afraid to go there. You know, let's not be afraid to like let children experience bittersweetness or, you know, something like a longing and anyway.
There's a lot of really small moments that like reinforce that too, like along the whole series, like the way that they interact with each other. Like I remember this one moment where Jupiter is like, nobody really wants to dance with me because I'm so tall, and Ami's like, I'll dance with you. You know, it's like there's these little moments of just support and just pure like
That
friendship.
never happens in Avengers or something like that, does it?
I mean, I love Avengers too. I've watched every single one of them.
Right.
But you know, it's just like, you know, I think there's something for everybody, but I think that there's something but I really think there's something for everybody in Sailor Moon. I think that if you never watched it, you should watch it.
Yeah.
Like, don't think that it's just like for girls or for kids or whatever. You gotta watch it.
Definitely
So
not.
if you're trying to sell a Sailor Moon CG animated feature film, big budget, and this goes out to maybe some executives that are listening to the podcast.
Toei, if you're listening.
What do you think is the biggest selling point
that it's Sailor Moon, man.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right.
And you know
Like,
what?
you're gonna have to, like in the teaser, literally just have some like new artist remix like the instrumental for the opening.
It's
Like,
already happening.
It's done.
Oh, okay.
It's also already happening in so many other avenues. I think there's this 24-hour animation challenge involving Sailor Moon where people reanimate.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally,
Have you
yeah.
seen that?
Mhm.
There's that. There's
It's so
the
cool.
new reboot that they just did.
Yeah.
That
Have you seen
wasn't
that?
successful, I guess.
Yeah.
It got picked apart a little bit.
Sure.
But I do think, like, especially recently, I've been thinking about that Lupin the Third trailer.
Oh, yeah.
And the Dragon Quest trailer.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I come from like a purely like I grew up with anime. I saw some Disney, but I grew up with anime, you know. And
Yeah.
so for me, it's like, what if we got to do something like? What if I got to do something like that?
Yes.
And I would like kill for that opportunity. It would be so fun. And then you have like LaShawn Thomas just did a show with Netflix that's very anime inspired, and it's like, I think there's room, guys. I think there's room.
There's so many possibilities, and
sign me up.
yeah, absolutely. So anyone who's listening, you know where to reach us.
Yes.
Okay, so this episode just ended up being like
About Sailor Moon.
which is I'm fine
okay.
with.
Yeah.
So speaking of favorite characters, I know you like Harley Quinn. Why her?
Why Harley?
Why not, Shiyoon?
Yeah.
Why not? I mean, the other, like I said, I mean, I have a lot of like animated cartoon shows that influenced me now. A lot of it was
Right.
Sailor Moon, like I said, but there was also Dragon Ball Z, and there was also Batman the Animated Series,
Oh, okay.
which is
Bruce
the
Timm.
birthplace
Yeah.
of Harley Quinn, and
And
I'm
that
such a
influenced
fan.
you a lot too, right, Shiyoon?
Oh, that was like one of my favorite cartoons.
Yeah, I mean,
Awesome.
like that opening still holds up. Like that's
Right.
another
So
show
good.
that still holds up to this day, by the way.
Yeah.
And it's like it's one of my favorites, and I love Bruce Timm's art, and I love the way he draws Harley.
Right.
And so it's like if I so even now, like I draw her all the time. She's just a funny, kooky character to draw. She's
Right.
got such a strong graphic statement about her that there's so many possibilities.
Right.
And
And
maybe,
you like seeing how other people interpret
yeah,
it
I think
too,
I
right?
love seeing the like this whole like redesign thing. There's a lot of that going on, and I love that stuff. I love seeing characters kind of reimagined with different costumes and different takes or whatever. But my Harley Quinn that I like to draw is always going to be more influenced by anime and Bruce Timm than anything else. You know,
Yeah. Do you relate to her in any way?
not really. Not. I mean, like I don't have like a psycho boyfriend that I follow around and do weird shit for.
You don't carry around
Ryan,
a bat like smashing windows and cars all the time.
But she's kind of pure in her own way, though.
Yeah.
You know, she's one of these characters that she's kind of stuck in whatever it is she's in, but she just kind of is purely her, and that's still kind
Did
of
you see the
interesting.
episode where she died? Like, I think there was a movie
Oh, I don't think I saw
where
that.
Harley Quinn dies.
Really?
And it's actually animated really well. It's animated by TMS, and they did like all.
I
the,
know what you're talking about. Yeah,
really
yeah.
Great.
I'm gonna have to look that up because no, I don't think
So
I've seen
it's-
that.
it's kind of like
one
a-
of the standalone. Is it a standalone movie or is it,
It
one
might
of
be
the
a standalone.
episodes?
I saw
no.
it on YouTube.
Some of our listeners are like pulling their hair out, like,
Oh my
how
God.
could you not know this, you
yeah,
guys?
I mean, I'm so embarrassing as a person that works in movies. I haven't seen the first Star Wars. I'm so sorry. I can't. Like,
That's okay.
Yeah.
That one, some of the listeners are really.
Yeah, I know.
Well, that particular episode is awesome because it's like it's animated in Japan by these like really awesome Japanese anime like
Yeah, I know.
animators.
Shout out to TMS.
Yeah.
And then
gonna
it's
look it up.
in that
Yeah.
Bruce Timm style. So sometimes they did that like back then.
Yeah, like they kind of like got production houses in Japan or
Yeah,
like,
there's
did
some
that, right?
episodes of like the more recent DC Justice League animated series, especially the later season. I think it's season 2 that has like really great animation for TV shows. Yeah, I loved that one. I remember at Cal Arts, like I would watch it in my cube with my friends because it was just, and that was another one where it's like they would also give a lot of weight to the female superheroes even back then, and this was back in like what 2005 2006 where it hadn't become such a trend yet, and those are always my favorite episodes where I was like, this is why I like it. And it was also, all the stories were so good about interweaving personal drama with whatever was going on. I think that's kind of Bruce Timm's strength too. It's not like each of the episodes aren't just about like oh, here's the villain of the day, and here how they're... No, it's about like, Batman is having drama with Wonder Woman, is having drama with Superman, but they just got to deal with it because they have to fight, like, that's what's juicy, you know?
Right.
He also does a great job with the villains, like Clayface.
Oh,
That episode
yeah.
was great. It was
Yeah.
one of those where I was like, oh my God, Clayface, you know?
You feel bad for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My favorite is always going to be Catwoman.
Catwoman.
Yeah.
Oh.
She
Little
was
gay
great there,
boy
too.
in me, like from all that whole time ago.
The redesigned one or the original? Or,
I
like-
really like the original one
Yeah.
with like she has that like little belt. Like
Yeah.
that,
And she's got the gray and then the
yeah,
black
the gray and the
boots.
black.
Yeah.
Yeah. So classic.
So now that we've had some fun talking about Sailor Moon and DC
Yes.
and Bruce Timm,
Yes.
I have a question for you guys.
Uh-oh.
I
Turning the tables.
you know, we're all artists, and as artists, we are riddled with insecurities. And I'm curious what your guys' insecurities. I can go first if you want to think about it. But and I've talked about this particular thing privately with my sister and Ryan and some other friends, and I just was wondering what you guys thought about it. I have this like fear that the art that I'm doing right now is a fad, and like 10 years from now, I'll look back and be like, oh, that was part of that trend and it's so outdated. And it's like, how do I keep up? Like, that's one of my biggest fears in the industry is how do we keep up? Because also I don't know if you guys, I know you're on Twitter all the time, Shiyoon, but I'm on Twitter and I follow all these amazing artists and they're like 12 years old. And I'm like, where do I fit in 10 years from now when I'm trying to get there, when I'm competing with them?
Yeah. Wow. That's an interesting, thanks for
Wow.
being so vulnerable about that.
Yeah.
When you said that question, when you said your insecurity, my first thought was like, you don't have to worry about that, man. Like, you're so set. And it's like, I think sometimes like timed art, meaning like art of the time, can sometimes end up being like a really precious like time capsule. Like, think about like some of the art, and not all of it, right? But think about some of the art that was generated in the 50s and the 60s,
Right.
and even the 80s, and now even the 90s, where it's like it's so of that time, but because it was so unapologetically of that time, that's what its value actually is. Like you get to be like, oh man, this
Oh my
is
God,
so
Minkyu,
80s.
so nice.
But you know what I mean? Like I feel like, that's my first response to that. But I don't know. For
thinking of-
are you?
I'm thinking of like a lot of insecurities.
Oh,
So, like,
man.
which one is like okay to say on the podcast?
Okay, I can go first. I can go first while I
Alright,
think
go.
of that. And it's kind of a little bit of a twist on an insecurity because it used to be an insecurity of mine, but I feel like now I'm kind of seeing it turned around as a strength of mine. Where it's like for the longest time, even when I was younger, I was never really into boy stuff, like all the stuff that the boys loved. And they were like, you got to watch this, you got to watch that. I love this moment. And, I was like into Sailor Moon and all these different things. And, being in the industry, especially when you go into workplaces or crews that are heavily quote unquote boy, not to, talk them down or anything, but just like more of like a male perspective. The films that are referenced, the films that serve as inspirations, all are going to tend to skew more quote unquote like traditionally boy movies. And so I've been in a lot of meetings or situations, even meetings with executives where all the executives are just spitballing on like how much they love this property that is clearly skewed to boys, and they just have so much knowledge with it, and I kind of don't, because I was never really into it and it never appealed to me. And when you're in that kind of situation, sometimes you can feel insecure because it's like, man, am I just not seeing what's so appealing about it? Like, what's wrong with me that I'm not like relating to what they're saying? But I think I've kind of come to a point where I'm like, no, that's not me, and there's value in me liking things that none of these guys like. And again, like that's why I love that we talked about Sailor Moon for a little bit, because it's like, man, none of you guys even know like the best episodes of Sailor Moon or whatever, like where it's like, I can have just as like, an enriching, excited, passionate conversation about things that maybe these people don't relate to. And that's actually not my insecurity, but actually my strength and what makes me unique as an artist. I feel like that's kind of the lesson that I'm learning these days. I don't know. Did that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. And
yeah.
it's like, and it kind of reminds me back to when I first started at Disney, because throughout my life, I've been influenced by anime. I draw very much like that.
Yeah.
And I remember, not in a mean or disparaging way, but I did get a few comments like, oh, it looks too anime. Like, it doesn't look like Disney, you know, whenever because I'm a set designer, but I like to do moment paintings, and I like to put characters in them just for context for myself, even just to keep myself interested in. And it did come up a couple times, and so I kind of beat it out of me. Like at Disney, I tried very hard to like go as Disney as possible, and it was hard for me because it's not something I grew up with. But nowadays I'm like, I don't even care. It's gonna look like anime.
Yeah,
and that's all I'm gonna do.
Yes.
I'm just gonna draw it the way I want to draw it. And it's like,
that's awesome.
and it's but I also think that I very luckily also am doing it in a time when anime is more mainstream and is more prevalent, and people are more used to seeing it, and those aesthetics are making its way into mainstream animation as we like. I mean, like Spider-Verse is a great example with Penny Parker and all this, and like
that was me actually just ripping off Sailor Moon, by the way. So.
But also, I mean,
Sounds
it
like
was
you should.
also
Oh, wait, I
your
shouldn't be
take,
saying that
and
right
you
now.
made that so amazing. Come on, let's acknowledge,
model
like
sheets,
you
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
I mean,
Very inspired by
Spider, like the aesthetic that you brought to Spider-Verse. I think you really took the best of anime, the best of Disney, like the best of all your influences, and I would say you really put it into a new level. So.
Actually, I actually haven't ever watched one episode of Sailor Moon. I've never
Shiyoon.
watched the.
That's okay.
I don't know what you guys are talking about.
That's okay. I think that's
But
okay.
I was like, I gotta really like for that Penny Parker
Parker
anime character. I had to do like so. Phil and Chris both. And the directors, they both really wanted, let's make this as anime as possible. How can we make this the most anime thing ever? They even thought about bringing like actual anime like artists to like design Penny Parker. And I was like, oh, like I actually thought about Sailor Moon. I was like, there's something about the way they do those facial expressions. They do these takes. And they're very like iconic and like really funny and like really. And I was like, oh, Penny Parker's kind of should have that side of her. So I was inspired by.
I love
like
that.
the hard eyes. Like all of a sudden
Yeah.
it'll be serious, but then they'll just do a thing and they're kind of like. Yeah, I love it.
I
too.
love. See, that's another thing where it's like that's a very like early '90s, late '80s anime thing, and I love that. Like you can see it in stuff like Ranma and stuff like.
Yeah.
Like it's just so appealing and like, and it's such good animation in its own
is.
right. Like you know what I
is,
mean? Like
yeah.
it's not. It's like they're really exaggerating character animation with the tools that they have, you know, because of like with the limited production budget and the really fast schedule, but they're making it so effective, and in the end the result is so damn appealing.
Yeah.
Totally.
Okay, so what's your insecurity, Shiyoon?
I guess mine is, like it kind of relates to what Helen was talking about, like, just being out of style or like passe, like, because part of the thing is working as a viz dev design person, like if you're not working at Disney, you're always looking for the next project, and part of it is like people hire you based on like trends, I think, like stylistically trends. And so there's this insecurity of like, oh, maybe one day like nobody will want to hire me and it'll be like this old. I was like, oh, that's that old man style, like old people draw like that.
Really?
I think that's a thing. I think it's like, like when I look at, I'm sorry,
You
but,
can't say that. You can't say people.
but I was like, I can see, because part of my livelihood as a designer, like especially when you don't, like we're going into this space now where like there isn't a lot of studios where they have an in-house team. Part of it is like kind of word of mouth, and sometimes like trends come and go.
Yeah.
And I think I just don't want to be irrelevant.
Yeah. But I do think like there are trends and then there's quality, and no matter what trend
I don't have either
it
of
is,
that. Fucked.
I do think quality stands out, though.
Not
You
even-
know,
that's not true, though.
Yeah,
That's
we're
another-
gonna just
that's
like
another-
ignore that comment
Yeah.
because it's so not true. But like, I think no matter what trend you're a part of, like I think as long as the quality is up there, it'll still be memorable, memorable, even after many, many years. Like, I mean, just the fact that we're talking about freaking Sailor Moon and Ranma.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll come back. Yeah.
Well, but you know what it is too, though, is underneath all of that, it's like Rumiko Takahashi does Ranma. You can tell that she's just a beast at drawing. She can draw whatever. She's a draftsman, you know, and it's like. And that's another thing too, is I feel like the only reason that I'm still in this industry and still like doing stuff is because I went to school and I was pretty much classically trained. I didn't do concept art in school. I just did figure drawing and oil painting.
Oh, wow.
And so it's like, and so it gives me the flexibility to match, you know, not be afraid of perspective and match style when I need to. So there is that aspect of it that I do feel like is part of it. But I am also very scared of irrelevancy, and
but actually, I had a question related
and what
to
it means.
Because I actually talked to Manu about this a little bit. He said there is a prime period for an artist. Where you where you have the energy to do work that is important to you, and you actually have the energy to do it. You have the skill set. You're actually physically able to do that. And he said like 30 to 50. That's like your, you know, realistically looking at your life and seeing how most people die at a certain age. Like even looking at.
But that can't be applicable to everyone, right? Like it's
just a general thing. But it's like, well, I could really see that because like, looking in my 20s and then like my 30s now, I genuinely get more tired. I have less energy to really work on stuff, and it makes you think like, wait, like I actually started thinking about like me dying. I was like, if I die, like
it got so dark.
In the background, Jihyun just said, "We have a baby, that's why."
I think about my future, and I'm like, well, you know, I'm pretty much no one's gonna remember me except for the people that are my friends and that are close to me. Like, do you ever start thinking about like, okay, I have this gift or, you know, a talent for drawing and making art. Like, what am I gonna do with it? That is gonna, like, you know, does that, for me, it motivated me to go like, I should really think about like what I want to say, like, as an artist.
Yeah.
Should I like make art that is important for me, even if nobody gives a crap about it after I die? Like, at least there's like something I kind of leave behind, like even when I'm not there. And I kind of think of art that way too. It's like, oh, like art kind of lives beyond you. Like even those silly sketches, someone else is gonna look at that, like, even after you die. And I just wondered, like, do you have like certain things like that? Like, okay, well, I only have like if you look at it as a game, it's like you only have like 10 to 30 years of like really concentrated, physically being able to make art that you want to make on your own terms. Are there things, projects that, you know, you don't have to talk about?
First of all, do you think that what he's saying is true? Do you agree with his statement?
It's very nihilistic.
Yeah, I think so. But I think that it just depends on what kind of person you are. Because for me personally, I haven't started thinking about that until very recently. And I've been pretty content in just kind of doing my job. But then like in my own time, I do silly sketches or drawings for myself, which is stuff I like because it makes me happy and I like it.
Yeah, we'd love to see them.
Well, it's all the fan art stuff.
Oh, okay,
like it's just fun. It's like you're on autopilot. You just do stuff that you enjoy.
Yeah.
But it's like, but yeah, I have thought about what it would mean for something like more or deeper. But I'm not entirely convinced that for me personally that is something I need in my life, because it's like maybe it's fine if I die and people just know me as like a Disney visive artist who drew Sailor Moon once in a while. Like maybe that's okay. You know, like maybe I don't personally need to be like, I want a legacy. Like, you know, and it's like it's just because I've in the past, I don't know if it's because I'm covering up my own insecurities when I say it or whatever, but I've always been pretty clear that I understand my role as a studio artist and what that means versus an artist. And
what is that? Okay, let's slow down
oh
there.
No. Okay.
Let
me unpack it.
Yeah, how do you differentiate that? Like, what to you, like, what's the first thing, like, going into that?
I guess what it is that, to me, it's how other people define me, right? Or how they define art versus studio art versus job work you do for clients. Versus, I mean, people talk about it all the time too. Like, they even talk about how like the Sistine Chapel is basically commissioned. It's not like that was his own thing. He got paid to do it, and he did it beautifully, and he did it in his own way and stuff. But I kind of get frustrated sometimes when people get too like they put certain art on a pedestal for certain reasons, and then they project those beliefs onto artists and what their art means. And I just don't know that I subscribe to any of it, and I don't know that I care. You know. And for me right now, I'm in the if I wanted to do a project that felt true and that I felt like I had something unique to say, I would definitely do it and call it what you're saying, like maybe my life's work or whatever it is. Maybe I'll do it when I'm 50. I don't know. But at the same time, I'm not going to also be 32 and going through life thinking, I don't have my Sistine Chapel. What am I going to do with myself? Right. I'm not. I'm going to go home. I'm going to bake some sourdough bread and I'm going to be super happy, you know?
Yes.
So it's like, I think it's like, it's very personal, and
yes,
I don't know that I'm that type of bitch. Like, I don't know that I'm that type of person. But
I am that type of bitch. And I wish I was more like that, Helen.
Well, you know, I think what I think is interesting, though, and I think what you said about the Sistine Chapel is like so relevant here, because like in the back of my mind as we were talking about this, like inevitably what comes up is like the animators of the past that we still remember. Like, I mean, even thinking about, you know, Richard Williams, who is very much in our minds today. You know, it's like he never truly got to see Thief and the Cobbler finished, like his, you know, quote unquote Sistine Chapel, maybe the way he wanted and completed. But him as an artist is, I mean, he just changed animation, and we're never going to forget him. You know, every young new animator is going to look at his book, and even someone, you know, like his teacher, like Milt Kahl, you know, who we talk about a lot. And I do think, you know, because Milt Kahl had a very competitive edge to him, maybe he was thinking this next character is going to be my Sistine Chapel. But at the same time, like you said, Helen, like Milt Kahl was just doing commissioned work too, you know, and it, as far as we know, we don't know if like his personal, what he wants to say about humanity or whatever. And maybe it does. I'm just saying we don't know. Maybe, you know, there are people who are listening who does know, you know, but
I was just thinking about my death. That's it. Way to bring it down.
Yeah, you know, my favorite filmmaker, Tarkovsky, he always says that humans were just preparing for death.
All right. Nice.
That's what we're doing. So,
awesome.
yeah.
Uplifting.
A great note.
Looking forward to my drive home by myself.
Great note to end the podcast on.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
I just think that it's like, it's the same with ambition, right? I don't like it when people judge somebody for having too much or too little or whatever. You know, you know what's best for you, what'll make you happy, and what you want.
Right.
It's fine.
I guess for me, it was just like, I don't, I have all these ideas that are in the back of my head. I'm like one of my, like, I was reading a quote one day, and it was basically one of the most saddest things is you have these ideas and you don't really act on it. Or you have these stories that you want to tell and you didn't get to do it.
Sure.
And I was like, oh man, like for me, I was like, even if no one sees this story or like no one really, everyone hates it, I was like, man, like it just, for some reason I had this pressure to just be like, oh, I kind of saw 20 years ahead, and I was realistically thinking about my health 20 years from now, and I'm like, I probably won't be able to like.
You gotta eat healthy now, Shiyoon. Then.
Oh my God, Shiyoon.
Yeah.
But you've seen it with other artists too, like Milt stuff. Like towards, I almost feel like he, like, if you compare his like Bambi stuff.
Yeah.
or even Sleeping Beauty to like
Medusa?
Medusa and stuff.
Mhm.
They have different qualities,
Yeah.
but I almost feel like there's just this energy that like you definitely I think I feel like people need to take advantage of, like plan.
Sure.
Like in your 20s and 30s, I feel like there's an energy there
Yeah.
that you probably won't be able to have.
Right.
Towards
But I
time.
think with Milt, maybe a lot of it was like circumstantial with like how frustrated he was with just having to do the same thing over and over again, as opposed to in the beginning. And this is again just me projecting, but I see what you're saying about his work. And like in the beginning, you know, that fresh discovery of animation that the Nine Old Men was doing. Like there was a feeling of like, oh my gosh, we're actively like pioneering this medium maybe,
Right.
as opposed to maybe towards the end, like, you know, I've read, you know, in a few different sources, like he did get a little bit disillusioned by like, he's just doing this over and over again, which is why I think towards like the end of his life he started experimenting with like wire sculptures, which is like, you know, if you've seen them, they're gorgeous.
Right.
And I think so to me maybe that was a little bit more of like his spirit of like at that time he just needed to do something else, and maybe if he did go and do something else, even if he was like in the later years of his life, he would have maybe have been just as good as like his Bambi years or whatever, if you are saying like his Bambi years are his best years, which I kind of personally disagree, but well, that's another episode
No,
we'll get into.
I guess what I meant with Bambi too, I was like, if you look at those, this is me nerding out, but if you look at those model sheets, he actually has some very thoughtful and very specific comments for his team.
Sure.
And I could tell like he really kind of like had this care
Yeah.
of like, hey guys, this has got to look exactly like this. This is exactly what's in my head. And then towards the end, I could tell he's just like, I'm doing my own thing. Like,
yeah, and I think I
Yeah.
think he reached a point in his life where he was like, that's just what he wants to do. Like at that time, like the Bambi stuff and like really trying to figure out a new way to animate a deer that was true to life, that captured life in a new way, was probably really exciting for him. And then again, I'm just projecting out into the world, and if there are any Milt Kahl experts, like people who you know who knew him really well, please contact us, because I'm sure we would love to talk.
That made me think of another question was, have you ever thought of doing a project with your husband or your sister?
Oh yeah.
I would do it with my sister. I wouldn't do it with Ryan.
Oh
Really?
Yeah. I mean, like it's really strange. Everybody, people think that me and Ryan met at Disney or something, but no, we actually met in college. So we've been together for 13 years now.
Wow.
And even now, it's like we talk about what we're each working on. Like I'll show him stuff, he'll show me stuff, and it's all good. But I kind of feel like if we're actually supposed to high stakes sit down and make something,
Together.
it might be kind of rough. I think that we're
Interesting.
both we have very strong opinions, and our aesthetics don't always line up. But we both respect what each other what we can do. Like I feel like Ryan is crazy. I don't know how he paints the way he does. And I always throughout our time together, I was always scared that people would think I was trying to rip him off or something. So I almost consciously never tried to do what it is he does, you know? And so, and plus it's really hard and time consuming, and I don't want to do it. But I think that, you know, it's like we found a balance in our kind of art versus our, you know, normal day lives, and I just wouldn't want to mess with it.
Oh yeah.
But my sister, I definitely would want to do something with.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
for
like
sure.
what? I mean, you talked about Ryan, but like, is there? What about your sister that makes you want to, like? Do you guys feel like, oh, you guys would kind of jive on just like the things that you'd want to draw or design, or
I think
like
so.
stories that you'd want to say?
I mean, me
together?
and Linda, we're kind of weird. We do have these weird twin moments where I'll like message her, be like, I feel like ham, and she's like, I would feel like ham too. I was just
Really?
thinking about telling you I want ham. So
Wow.
it's like, and we grew up with the same influences. We are
Wow.
very similar in our thoughts about things that are happening in the world,
Wow.
you know. And so, I would feel very comfortable doing something with her.
That's awesome.
As
Yeah.
a student of astrology, that sounds so interesting to me.
Oh, really?
Yes. We don't have to get into it, but it's yeah. Anyway, sorry
No,
to
yeah, no.
like interrupt that conversation with that.
Oh, that's awesome. That's really interesting. Like Ryan, maybe not, but your sister, like you can kind of see something there.
That's cool. You guys should do something for sure.
Maybe we will. I don't
Yeah.
know.
It's like having an extra you. Like it's unstoppable. I mean, not to like simplify it as an extra you,
Yeah,
but just
yeah.
going off of what you said of like, sharing so many opinions. Like, man, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I had another question that I was like maybe that I was like
Yeah. Are you
interested
good
in
to keep
asking.
going?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
So part of your job is kind of, art as an art director. You're working with the team, and I think some of the most challenging things, even for me, because I'm very introverted, is speaking up in meetings, but a lot of like it's almost like, and it's been my experience. It's almost like not about the art. It's actually about where we landed in the meeting. So it's this, for me, like this whole psychological game plan, strategizing how to frame things the best way. Like,
Yeah.
are there things that you've learned just you're experiencing working with different types of directors that would be helpful for someone that's interested in like doing that position, or just someone that's introverted that it's hard for them to speak up in meetings?
Yeah, it's hard for me too. I still struggle with that. Sometimes I have to repeat what I want to say in my head like 40 times before I actually say it in the room. It'll be 10 minutes later. I'll be like, back to that thing. I just had this one thought. Like it's really like that, especially if I'm in a story meeting or something, because it's like it's very intimidating, and they have their own flow and they have these ideas, and I'm just a visive artist. I don't know. It's like, but I do have some ideas sometimes that I want to just throw out there, whether or not they take it.
Right.
And so for me, one of the things that I've kind of learned is when I first started at Disney, I wouldn't speak up at all. I would just sit in the back. In my head, I was like, oh, I drew a car. They'll just look at the car and then it'll be over. But now I think more and more, especially depending on the directors you have, sometimes they really like you to explain your thought process.
Right.
And I think being able to pitch your idea clearly, like from what you're drawing for, what you're shooting for, what the feeling you're going, like what you're trying to say with the design is very important. Like,
so let's slow down into that. Like basically, because I've been in the same situation too. So you were saying like, I think previously, like some ideas you just don't really believe in it, but you're also just doing it because you want to just address that note, but also you'll have your own idea that you'll put next to it, right? So
you have to be upfront with it.
in the process of doing that, like I noticed, I realized just this is my quirk. I'll start to shade in the one that I really like.
Oh yeah, put more extra care. Like, look at how pretty
And
this
I'll
one
put
is.
that, the one that I didn't really like, just like in the corner.
Yeah,
Here,
don't
I
notice
just
that
kinda
one.
Adjust this one, but
Yeah.
like this is the one that I'm really into. Like,
I'll remember
do you
that.
do that too? Like, and the process of, because you're kind of selling an idea to a client or to a group of people,
To your director.
to your director, and how much like do you try to like present every option as equally, like
No.
give him an equal chance for the director to respond to, or do you kind of favor some of them just in the composition, the way that you frame it?
I don't know if you remember stuff that I've shown in meetings and stuff, but I'm kind of a weirdo. I don't like sitting there and coming up with every possibility under the sun. I go with my gut.
Good.
So if I do present a set, at most maybe I'll present 2 or 3 different options, but they'll all be pretty similar in like what they're trying to say.
Right.
Like my biggest thing with design and animation specifically is it's not especially for a set designer, it's easy to downplay like that it's just designing tables and chairs and stuff, but it's not really that. It's not about like designing what something is, it's designing what that thing is saying about that moment or the scene that it's set in. And so I frame all of my ideas around that. So I always tell the directors, this is the reference I was looking for based on what happens on this scene. It would be cool if the set was set up like this to get this feeling, whether it's like sad or happy, whatever it is. Like, and then I present the 1 or 2 ideas.
Right.
Mm.
Oh,
And
I
then
see.
but it's also easier to do though because I'm not a character designer. I don't have to put up a sheet of like 20 versions of a character going in different directions.
Mm-hmm.
I choose the 2 or 3 that I believe in the most, and then I
Right.
just present those.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. A lot of it I feel like has to do with like your personal relationship with the director
Yeah,
too, a
it's
little
so
bit.
like every director is
It's
different.
so different, right?
Yeah.
Like
and every production designer is different too.
right.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's directors who will get you so pumped up about your own idea
Right.
and make you feel so good about presenting like here's what I really really believe in. And then there are some directors also I think who are a little bit more matter of fact of like this is what I want, and so you do become just kind of a more of a helping hand. And
Right.
yeah, but it is like I think one of the elements that yeah definitely when you're presenting your work you should consider is that kind of like unspoken like just awareness of like how the director's communication style and how likely it is that the director will appreciate doing exactly that.
responding to
Yeah.
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 And it also it depends on how much you understand them, really,
Right.
even
Yeah.
as people.
Mhm.
It's just weird. Like I tell this story all the time, but it's funny to me every single time. I had this one director way back when I was first starting out, not at Disney. It was for like a freelance thing. I just need to say that just in case. But this director was like, I painted this lamp, and the director's like, "Can you make the lamp the size of a small hug?" And I was
hug?
like,
A
"A
hug?
hug." And I was like, "Okay, a small hug?" And he's like, "Yeah, if you like wrap your," and he said this, like, if you like wrap your hands around somebody and give them a tight hug, like that size. And I was like,
Lord.
I was like, "Do you want to give me some feet or some inches?" Like,
Yeah. Can
But-
we
but it was
bust out like a tape
Uh.
measure?
well, but what's funny is like, in my head I saw it. I was like, "Oh, okay, I think I know what size that is. That's fine." That's like, but it's just an interesting way to put it.
Wow.
But
Wow.
it was like, but then I think what I ended up doing is I did the painting and I just did 3 versions with slightly bigger lamp in each one, and he chose one. I don't remember which one he chose, but apparently it was something that was closest to a small hug.
Right.
Wow.
But it's like, but yeah, sometimes you just don't know. Like, you don't really know. Like, and when I was working on Frankenweenie, I didn't even talk to Tim Burton, not once. For reviews, he would ask that the entire art department leave, and he would just be with the production designer looking at the work, so they could
Wow.
be completely honest with each other.
Right.
And they told
Was
us to
that
just take
unnerving a little bit because
It was
like-
my first job in animation, so I didn't know it was weird. I didn't
okay.
know it was it's not even really that weird now. I understand the thought process. They were just like, everybody go take a long lunch. So we went to like Daphne's Creek and we sat there and we waited, and then we came back and Tim Burton left with his big security guard, and we resumed our workday.
Oh, okay,
Wow.
Yeah.
wow.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah. So you never know how they're gonna act.
Right.
Yeah.
Because most of the time, it seems like at Disney, it's very the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Where
They
you
like to-
invite everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was weird when I got to Disney. I was like, oh, you see the director here? That's so interesting. You
Yeah.
know?
Wow. Everybody has an opinion here. Okay.
or like oh, you get to see the famous people. Like kind of like that. Like,
yeah.
oh, that's Ron and John. Like,
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
for sure. So I think that's about the time we have for this episode. Helen, thank you so much for
Thank
being
you so
here
much.
and
Thanks,
talking
Helen.
with us
Mm-hmm.
and sharing your opinions about anything. Do you have anything that you want to promote or plug or announce?
Well, you can just follow me on Twitter. It's where I do most. If I have something interesting, I'll just put it on there. It's Minkyu Chen, and you can follow my husband Ryan Lang Draws, all on Twitter.
How about your Instagrams? Are you guys not?
Oh
as-
yeah. I do have my Instagram. It's the same thing. It's just Minkyu Chen.
And Ryan's is also.
I don't remember.
Okay.
It's something like that. It's
Find it, guys.
Yeah.
Find Ryan's Instagram. Also, to our listeners, so we did receive a lot of questions, and they were all really, really great questions. And it's our hope that we get to all of them in one way or another, either if they become topics for a future episode. Some of the questions seemed like they would be really well suited for some of our future guests, so we might save them for that. But again, please send us your questions, thoughts, comments, suggestions, whatever you guys want at Minkyu and Shiyoon at gmail.com. The email address should be on our description, on our social media pages. So thanks so much for listening, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.